With a history spanning continents and centuries, cue sports has long been one of society's favorite forms of entertainment. From the pool halls of New York to the prestigious snooker championships in the UK, billiards has been an integral part of culture worldwide. Where did these games originate, and how did they become what we know today? Each variation of billiards has a unique history, shaped by different eras, cultures, and players. While we often think of these games as modern pastimes, their roots stretch further back than most realize, with origins in medieval Europe and even as far back as ancient Rome. In this video essay, we'll trace the complete history of billiards and all of its variations. From the intricacies of one pocket to the precision of three cushion, no variation of billiards will go overlooked. Covering cue sports through the centuries, this is the complete history of billiards. Before billiards became the game we know today, the groundwork was laid over 2,000 years ago in ancient Rome with a game called Paganica. Paganica is one of the earliest documented examples of a game where players hit a ball with a stick, a concept that would evolve into croquet, golf, and eventually billiards. While historical records are sparse, it is believed that players used a curved stick to strike a leather ball filled with soft materials like feathers or wool. Though the exact rules are unclear, the game likely involved trying to hit a target or get the ball to a specific area. Paganica was especially popular among Roman soldiers, who played it between battles and marches. Its straightforward rules and easy setup made it a game that could be enjoyed anywhere, on a battlefield, in the town square, or in a camp. As the Roman Empire expanded, so did Paganica. Roman soldiers and civilians alike played the game in conquered territories, introducing it to regions that would later shape the future of cue sports. While Paganica itself faded after the fall of the Roman Empire, its influence lingered, evolving into more outdoor lawn games. Over time, as weather and seasons became a challenge, these outdoor games began moving indoors, and the first draft of the billiard tables we know today would emerge. Throughout the Middle Ages, various outdoor lawn games were played across Europe that involved hitting some type of ball with a stick. These games, including early versions of croquet, were popular among both nobility and peasants alike. The late 1300s saw the gradual transition from these outdoor lawn games to indoor table games. While outdoor games could only be enjoyed during fair weather, the nobility sought games that could be played year-round, particularly during the harsh European winters. To adapt these outdoor games for indoor play, large tables were introduced, covered in green cloth to mimic the grassy surfaces of outdoor fields. These early tables were often made of wood, with barriers surrounding the edges to prevent the balls from falling off. The balls were often made of wood, although some accounts suggest leather balls filled with sawdust or other soft material. Early versions of what would become the modern cue stick were called maces, a wooden stick with a large flat end to push the ball around the table. Players would maneuver the mace to push the ball, aiming at targets or hoops on the table. By the late 1300s, these indoor games became particularly popular among French and English nobility. Early references to these games suggest they were often played as social activities, with noblemen gathering to pass time and engage in friendly competition. These early indoor games were regarded as strategic and intellectual activities and as symbols of status. The rich, ornate tables were expensive, making the game mainly accessible to the upper class. By the close of the 1300s, the stage was set for the future of billiards. What began as a simple adaptation to the weather had become a status symbol, paving the way for billiards to spread beyond noble homes and become a global pastime. By the early 1400s, billiards was transitioning into a more structured indoor activity. Royals and aristocrats across Europe had begun adopting billiards as part of their courtly entertainment, where it became a status symbol and a game for the elite. Billiards was played in courts and castles, and while the rules varied from region to region, the general concept was the same. Players pushed the wooden ball around the table with a mace, aiming for a target or pin. This period laid the groundwork for the future standardization of the game. In France, billiards was especially popular among the aristocracy, with King Louis XI being one of the earliest documented enthusiasts. The medieval king commissioned a custom billiards table for his court, one of the earliest known examples of a billiard table used in a royal setting. The game spread to England during this time as well, partly due to the influence of royal marriages and interactions. English nobility began playing the game, helping it gain traction across the English Channel and in other European countries. By the 1500s, billiards had firmly transitioned into an indoor game, played predominantly by European nobility. The game was quickly becoming standardized, evolving both in terms of equipment and rules. While maces were still widely used during the early 1500s, this century saw the first steps in the development of the modern cue stick. The original mace was a long wooden stick with a flat end, similar to a small mallet. The flat, wide end of the mace was designed for players to push, not strike, the ball across the table. This design was effective for controlling the ball in the middle of the table, but posed problems for shots near the table's edge, where there wasn't enough room to maneuver the large head of the mace. Players soon figured out if they were to turn the mace around, using the handle to strike the ball, they could achieve more precise control over the ball. This technique soon became the preferred method of most billiards players, and the mace was refined into a longer, narrower stick, specifically designed for striking rather than pushing the ball. The term cue stick evolved from the French word queue, meaning tail. This is a reference to the tail or thin end of the mace that players originally used to strike the ball. The cue stick was essentially developed from the tail end of the mace, and the name has stuck ever since. By the mid-1500s, billiard balls began to be crafted from ivory rather than wood. Ivory billiard balls were expensive and considered a luxury, emphasizing the game's elitist status. The use of ivory balls would continue into later centuries, becoming more common in high-status courts. During the 1500s, the popularity of billiards exploded among the royals, with King Louis XII and King Francis I being prominent billiards players. Billiards had also begun to spread to Italy and Spain during this time period, with Spanish and Italian nobility accepting the game as a social and intellectual activity. Perhaps one of the most well-known connections to billiards from this period comes from Mary, Queen of Scots. While imprisoned in 1568, Mary wrote a letter detailing the loss of her belongings, particularly her beloved billiards table. In her letter, Mary writes, "Ils ont emporté ma table de billard." They have taken away my billiard table. After her imprisonment, Mary's life took a tragic turn. She was later executed on February 8, 1587. It's said that Mary's billiards table was repurposed to wrap her body after her execution. Whether this is entirely accurate or fictional is unclear, but it adds a poignant connection between Mary's execution and her love of the game. In the 1600s, billiards experienced significant developments that helped solidify its place as a sophisticated and strategic game played across European courts, castles, and eventually public spaces. One of the most important innovations of this period was the introduction of cushioned rails. Before the 1600s, the raised boundaries of billiard tables were often made of hard wood, causing the balls to bounce off unpredictably. In the early to mid-1600s, stuffed cushions made from materials like leather or linen began to be installed along the edges of tables. These cushioned rails allowed players to better control and predict the ball's direction when it bounced off the table's boundaries. By the early 1600s, the cue stick had largely replaced the mace as the primary tool for playing billiards. The mace didn't disappear entirely though, and some players, particularly novices, continued using it throughout the century. This era also saw further standardization of billiard rules, though players often followed different guidelines depending on the country, region, or even specific courts. Billiards continued to thrive in France under the reigns of Louis XIII and Louis XIV. During this time, the game became more elaborate, with wealthier players commissioning finely crafted billiard tables, often made of exotic woods and decorated with intricate designs. In England, the game also remained popular among the nobility, with King Charles I being a notable advocate. With the king's endorsement, billiards soon spread beyond the noble homes of England and into public taverns and billiard halls, introducing the game to a much broader audience. Billiards in the 1600s was not only a game for socializing, but it also became a popular avenue for gambling. Nobles and commoners alike would place bets on matches, and it became common to see large sums of money change hands during and after games. Billiards was frequently mentioned in the literature and art of this era. One of the earliest attempts to document the rules of the game came from Charles Cotton's The Complete Gamester. The famous English diarist Samuel Pepys also mentioned playing billiards several times in his diaries, once writing, "To my great content, I got a room to myself to play billiards." During this period, different variations of billiards began to emerge. One notable variation was carom billiards, also known as carambole, in France. In this version of the game, the objective was to strike the cue ball into two object balls in a single stroke. Carom billiards was played on a pocketless table, requiring a high degree of skill and precision. The invention of carambole was a significant development, as pocketless variations would later evolve into more complex games such as three-cushion billiards. The 1700s saw billiards experience more key innovations that would help shape it into the game we know today, with the most important being the invention of the leather-tipped cue stick, credited to Frenchman François Mingois. A former French soldier imprisoned for his political outspokenness, Mingois spent his time in solitary developing new billiards techniques. Previously, players used wood-tipped cues that severely limited control over the cue ball. Now, with the addition of a small leather tip to the cue stick, players could apply spin, or English, to the cue ball. New possibilities, such as draw or follow shots, enhanced the complexity and strategy of the game. Mingois' innovation also made possible the massé shot, where the cue ball could be curved around obstacles, a revolutionary development at the time. After his release from prison in 1807, he famously demonstrated his techniques on a trick shot tour in French courts and billiards clubs, showing how his leathered tip allowed for shots that had never been possible before. Another major development of the century was the shift from wooden table beds to slate. Wooden beds were prone to warping and led to inconsistent gameplay, while slate provided a smooth, even surface for players to enjoy a more consistent match. These innovations in equipment coincided with the growing popularity of public billiard halls. Once the domain of aristocracy, billiards had been made available to people of all social classes. The game would soon span continents, with British and French colonists introducing billiards to North America. Billiards has gone global. By the 1800s, the leather-tipped cue, invented by François Mingois in the late 1700s, had become widely adopted after Mingois' trick shot tour across France. Players began executing shots never seen before, using extreme spin, or English, to alter the cue ball's natural path. Along with these spin shots came miscues, which occur when the cue tip fails to make solid contact with the cue ball. To avoid miscuing, players introduced chalk to the game. Chalk helped create more friction between the leather cue tip and the cue ball, allowing the tip to grip the ball and still generate extreme spin. Chalk became essential to the game, improving players' accuracy and control. One of the major innovations of the 1800s was the introduction of vulcanized rubber cushions. Previously, the cushions on the table were made of leather or cloth, causing balls to rebound unpredictably. Rubber cushions allowed for consistent and reliable bounces, significantly improving the accuracy and strategy of the game. They also increased the speed of play by making the table more responsive. Ivory remained the standard material for billiard balls in the early 1800s, prized for its smooth texture and durability, which was essential in a game dependent on precision. However, the high demand for ivory led to the near extinction of elephants in some regions, sparking ethical concerns. Alternatives like celluloid, an early form of plastic, were being developed to replace ivory, marking one of the earliest uses of synthetic materials in sports equipment. While carom steadily increased in popularity throughout Europe in the 1800s, American billiards began to evolve in different directions. Michael Phelan, often called the father of American billiards, was instrumental in popularizing the game in the US. Phelan wrote the first American book on billiards in 1850 and established important rules and standards. He is credited with adding diamonds to the table to help players aim, as well as organizing the first major American billiards tournament in 1859, which attracted widespread attention. He also founded the Phelan and Calendar Manufacturing Company, which later merged with Brunswick to become one of the most dominant billiard equipment manufacturers. Pin pool was later developed, where players would aim at small wooden pins placed on the table, similar to miniature bowling. Another variation, 15-ball pool, also known as 61 pool, used balls numbered 1 through 15, and the player scored points based on the numbered ball they pocketed. 15-ball pool was used in the first American Championship tournament, held in 1878, which was won by Cyril Dion. While pin pool and 15-ball pool remained popular, the dominant American game for much of the 19th century was 4-ball billiards. Played on a large 11 or 12-foot table with 4 balls and 4 pockets, players scored points by pocketing balls or making caroms, striking 2 object balls with the cue ball in the same shot. The game's complexity allowed players to score multiple points per shot, with up to 13 points possible on a single shot. The 19th century also saw Russian innovation in the world of billiards, with Russian pyramid being introduced in the 1830s. Pyramid is one of the most challenging variations of billiards, played on a 12 by 6 foot table, with pockets only slightly larger than the balls, leaving little margin for error. While American pool tables allow for some forgiveness, pyramid tables never forgive and never forget. Russian pyramid encompasses many rule variations, with each game starting with a pyramid pack of 15 numbered balls. Players have the freedom to pocket any object balls, regardless of their number, and the objective is to pocket 8 out of the 15 balls to win the frame. In free pyramid, any ball can serve as the cue ball, and players are only allowed to pocket their cue ball, aiming to carom it off one or more object balls into a pocket. Other variations of Russian pyramid include dynamic pyramid, combined pyramid, and classical pyramid. Another new variation of billiards to emerge in the 1800s was black pool. First recorded in 1862, the game had a number of colored balls equal to the number of players, with an additional black ball placed on the center spot of the table. A player would pay a stake to an opponent who would pocket his designated ball. After potting their colored ball, the player would then be allowed to pot the black ball, which paid out a stake from every player at the table. After being pocketed, balls would be respotted on the table, allowing the player to continue alternating between the colored balls and the black ball to maximize their earnings. In 1875, during the British occupation of India, British Army officer Colonel Sir Neville Chamberlain took the games of pyramid and black pool and fused them into a new variation of billiards called snooker. Stationed in Jabalpur, Chamberlain formalized the rules of snooker, with 15 red balls, each worth 1 point, positioned in a triangle alongside 6 colored balls worth varying amounts of points ranging from 2 to 7. Similar to Russian pyramid, the game was played on a 12 by 6 foot table with 6 small pockets. This new game required a high degree of accuracy and strategy, as players had to alternate between potting reds and colors, racking up points as they clear the table. With players are also awarded points when their opponent fouls, the focus on defensive play became an essential skill as the game evolved into a test of not only offensive prowess, but also strategic thinking and foresight. Players quickly realized that controlling the table and limiting their opponent's options was just as important as high-scoring runs or breaks. This is where the art of snookering came into play, where players would deliberately leave their opponents in a position where there was no clear shot at an object ball. The goal was to snooker the opponent, forcing them to attempt a difficult shot or risk fouling by hitting the wrong color object ball. The term snooker itself came from a slang word used in the British Army to refer to inexperienced cadets, with Neville Chamberlain using the term to tease inexperienced players at the table. Snooker reflected the social class and environment it thrived during the 1800s, gentlemen's clubs. Matches were often long, slow-paced affairs, with players taking time to carefully analyze their next move, similar to a game of chess. Unlike other cue sports that rewarded quick, aggressive play, snooker rewarded patience, calculation, and the ability to outthink the opponent. As snooker grew in popularity across the British Empire, so did the need for standardized rules. In the late 1800s, governing bodies began to form, and the game saw its first official rulebook. By the close of the 1800s, snooker had already secured its place as a distinguished and complex sport, poised to grow beyond the gentlemen's clubs of Britain and India. A derivative of carom billiards, three-cushion billiards was also invented and popularized in the late 1800s. The exact origins of the game aren't entirely clear. However, it is undisputed that one of the key figures in popularizing three-cushion was Wayman Crowe McCreary, the Internal Revenue Collector of the port of St. Louis, Missouri. Played on a pocketless table with 3 balls, white, yellow, and red, 3-cushion billiards requires players to strike the cue ball in such a way that it contacts the 2 object balls, but only after the cue ball has made contact with at least 3 cushions. The game's challenge lies in the precision required to direct the cue ball around the table, calculating its trajectory off multiple cushions. Unlike faster-paced billiards games, 3-cushion evolved into a cerebral, highly strategic sport, where players not only sought to score points, but also to play defensively by controlling the table and forcing opponents into difficult positions. The first known 3-cushion tournament was held in January 1878 in Mussey's Billiard Room in St. Louis, with McCreary participating. The highest run of the tournament was 6 points, with the highest point average across a match being 0.75. The tournament attracted billiards players from across the country, with New Yorker Leon Magnus winning the title. However, the game struggled to gain traction in its early years, as many top carom billiards players refused to embrace the complexity of 3-cushion. In the 1800s, billiards was seen as a male-dominated sport, often associated with gentlemen's clubs and social circles. However, women began to carve out their own space in the world of billiards, despite societal expectations and limitations at the time. Billiards tables became a common fixture in upper-class homes, and women would often play in private, typically as a leisure activity rather than in a competitive setting. While the sport was not widely accepted as a proper activity for women in public spaces, many upper-class women learned to play and enjoyed the game within the confines of their homes and social gatherings. As the century progressed, women took a more visible role in billiards. Billiards and pool had already established themselves as popular recreational games across the globe, but the 20th century would see the evolution of billiards from a casual game to a recognized sport. Straight pool, also known as 14.1, was the most popular pocket billiards game throughout the early 1900s. The game used all 15 balls, with players being allowed to pocket any of them. When one ball remains on the table, the other 14 are re-racked, and the player must make the 15th ball, using the cue ball to break up the rack simultaneously. The 1919 Straight Pool Championship would see the rise of a legend, Ralph Greenleaf. Greenleaf would win the Straight Pool Championship a record 19 times between 1919 and 1938. Known for his calm demeanor, elegant stroke, and ability to make difficult shots look effortless, Greenleaf's fame extended beyond billiards halls, with newspapers and magazines covering his achievements. His obituary in the New York Times said of Greenleaf, "What Babe Ruth did for baseball, Dempsey did for fighting, Tilden did for tennis, Greenleaf did for pocket billiards." While Greenleaf laid the groundwork for the sport's popularity, it was Willie Mosconi who took straight pool to new heights. His career spanned from the 1930s to the 1950s, during which he won the World Straight Pool Championship 15 times between 1941 and 1957. Mosconi was known for his straight shooting accuracy and ability to run long streaks of balls in succession. Mosconi set the world record for the highest run in straight pool, pocketing 526 balls consecutively during an exhibition match in Springfield, Ohio. This record stood for over 65 years, a true testament to Mosconi's ability. Mosconi helped bring the sport into the mainstream through his work as a technical advisor for films such as The Hustler, which starred Paul Newman. The movie introduced straight pool to a broader audience and contributed heavily to the popularization of pool in American bars and pool halls. Mosconi retired from the tournament circuit in 1966 after making it to the finals of the World Straight Pool Championship once again, but losing at the hands of Joe Bolsus. Although retired from the professional game, media appearances and a popular feud with pool hustler Rudolph Minnesota Fats Wanderone, concocted mainly by Wanderone himself, kept Mosconi in the spotlight well into the 1970s and 1980s. By the 1970s, straight pool had begun to lose its dominance as the game of choice for professional and amateur players. Faster-paced games gained popularity due to their shorter match times and more dramatic play, while straight pool required longer, more methodical matches. Nonetheless, straight pool remains revered among pool purists for its emphasis on strategy, control, and precision. 8-ball emerged as a popular casual game in the early 1900s, gaining traction especially in bars and pool halls. Unlike straight pool, where players could shoot any ball, 8-ball required players to choose a group of either solid or striped balls and clear the table before pocketing the black 8-ball. Following World War II, 8-ball experienced a major boom in popularity as pool tables became common in American bars. The game's simple rules made it easy for casual players to pick up, and it became known as the people's game. 8-ball's influence extended beyond the United States, particularly in the UK, where a variant known as English 8-ball or blackball became the dominant pool game. Unlike American 8-ball, the English version was played with smaller, unnumbered red and yellow balls on tables with tighter pockets. By the 1950s, organized 8-ball tournaments began to emerge, and in 1979, the American Pool Players Association, or the APA, was founded. The APA quickly grew into one of the largest pool organizations, operating leagues for amateur players around the country. 9-ball's fast-paced nature and relatively simple rules made it a favorite among pool hustlers in the mid-1900s. The object of the game was to pocket the 9-ball in numerical order, with the player who pockets the 9-ball winning the game. 9-ball was already being played by the 1920s, but it wasn't until after World War II that it gained widespread popularity in the United States. Its fast pace made it perfect for gambling, as matches could be completed quickly and often with dramatic flair. The release of the film The Hustler, starring Paul Newman as Fast Eddie Felson, cemented 9-ball's reputation as the hustler's game. By the 1980s, 9-ball had become the game of choice for professional tournaments. The World Pool Billiard Association, WPA, standardized the rules, and the first US Open 9-ball championship was held in 1976. The 1980s and 1990s saw the rise of legendary players like Earl Strickland, Efren Reyes, and Johnny Archer, who dominated the 9-ball scene. In 1984, Strickland won his first US Open 9-ball championship, marking his first of 5 US Open titles. Efren Bata Reyes, a Filipino legend, made 4 appearances in the US Open finals, cementing his place as one of the greatest players of all time. Reyes's dominance and popularity helped usher in a new era of Filipino players who became fixtures in the global pool scene. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, bank pool became a popular game among hustlers and gamblers who appreciated its complexity. Unlike more popular games such as 8-ball or 9-ball, where luck could sometimes play a role, bank pool was a game of pure skill and precision. Bank pool is considered one of the cleanest games in billiards, requiring players to play bank shots into a called pocket and disallowing the contact of any other ball by the object ball. The shot must go exactly as intended for a player to score, removing the aspect of chance from the game. Hustlers favored bank pool because the game required an understanding of complex angles and physics, giving more experienced players a significant advantage over casual players. Players like Eddie Taylor, known as the Knoxville Bear, became iconic figures in the game. Taylor's exceptional banking ability made him one of the most feared bank pool players of all time. He is widely regarded as the best bank pool player in history. One pocket, often referred to as the chess of pool, is a highly strategic and cerebral variation of pocket billiards. The game of one pocket has its roots in the early part of the 20th century, particularly in the pool halls of the United States. Though its exact origins are difficult to pinpoint, it is widely believed to have been formalized by Hayden Lingo, a pool player from Kansas City, Missouri, who is credited with popularizing the game in the 1920s and 30s. The game appealed to players who valued strategy and control over the speed and power seen in more widely popular games like straight pool or 8-ball. Unlike traditional pool games, where players can pocket balls in any pocket, one pocket limits players to one designated pocket each. The goal is to score 8 balls in that one pocket, while simultaneously preventing the opponent from scoring in their designated pocket. During the 1930s and 1940s, one pocket became a popular choice among hustlers and gamblers. The game's slow pace and reliance on defensive maneuvers made it ideal for high-stakes matches where players could set traps, bait their opponents into bad shots, and win by outthinking their competition. By the 1990s, pool had transformed into a truly global sport. International players began to dominate, particularly in 9-ball, which became the premier format for world championships. European players like Ralph Souquet and Oliver Ortmann brought European precision and training to the table, while Filipino players like Jose Parica added a creative flair that made them difficult to predict. The Mosconi Cup, inaugurated in 1994, further globalized the sport by pitting top European players against the best from the United States. It quickly became one of the most prestigious events in the pool calendar, showcasing the rising international competition and setting the stage for the future of the sport. The 1900s ended with a flourishing international pool scene, a blend of different cultures and playing styles, setting the stage for the exciting developments of the 21st century in cue sports. As the 21st century began, billiards embraced its heritage while forging ahead with modern innovations and global recognition. The rise of matchroom pool is playing a pivotal role in this transformation, creating a broader platform for professional pool through events like the World 9-Ball Tour, which is reshaping the sport's landscape and brought its finest talents to a global stage. These high-profile tournaments showcase the skill and precision of contemporary stars like Shane Van Boening, Joshua Filler, and Fedor Gorst, pushing the boundaries of competition and drawing larger audiences than ever before. While 9-ball surged in popularity through this professionalization, other formats also found their own moments of resurgence. In Asia, Chinese 8-ball rose to prominence, combining elements of both British and American pool, and capturing international attention with its own rapidly growing fan base. In the realm of three-cushion billiards, players like Dick Jaspers continued to dominate, preserving the intricate and technical side of cue sports. Snooker also held its ground as a revered discipline, with figures like Mark Selby leading the charge, demonstrating the continued appeal of the game. The digital era has further transformed billiards, making the sport more accessible than ever before. Live streaming, social media, and video content have brought the excitement of tournaments and player insights to fans across the globe, extending billiards' reach and influence. Today, with the innovative push of organizations like Matchroom and the rise of stars across multiple cue sports, billiards stands stronger than ever, blending tradition with modernity and capturing the imaginations of both longtime enthusiasts and new audiences. Well, there you have it, the complete history of billiards. I can't help but feel an immense sense of pride and fascination being part of this incredible world. Learning about how the game has grown and evolved from its early beginnings to the modern formats we play today has given me a whole new appreciation for every shot, every match, and every table I've played on. Being involved in a sport with such a rich, complex, and sometimes wild history has taught me that billiards is more than just a game. It's a connection across time, bridging centuries and continents, played by everyone from hustlers to kings, from small-town pool halls to international arenas. It's amazing to think that what started as a simple pastime has become a global passion that unites people from all walks of life. So, if you've enjoyed this journey through time with me, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I hope to keep sharing what I've learned and maybe inspire a few of you to pick up a cue and get involved in this amazing game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.